Bullets tore through the old helicopter's walls. The pilot was dead. 5 SEALs stared at each other, out of options. Then their leader screamed one question into the smoke: "Can anyone fly this?" Nobody answered. Until the quiet prisoner in the corner slowly stood up, and every soldier froze in shock. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The old transport helicopter shook hard on the broken runway. Bullets hit the metal walls like hail on a tin roof. Inside the cabin, 6 Navy SEALs pressed against the sides, firing back into the dark. Smoke filled the air. It smelled like burning oil and hot metal. In the corner, a woman named Claire sat with her knees pulled to her chest. Her hands were tied loosely with a torn rope, cut just an hour ago when the SEALs broke into the small prison building where she had been held for 11 days. She had not eaten a real meal in that time. Her lips were cracked. Her left eye was swollen shut. She wore a dirty gray jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big for her thin frame. The SEALs did not know much about her. They only knew she was an American citizen who had been taken from a job site near the border. Command told them she was a low-level worker, maybe an engineer, nothing important. Get her out fast, they were told. Ask questions later. Claire had not corrected anyone. She had not said a single word since they pulled her out of that cell. Her throat was too dry to speak, and even if it wasn't, she had her reasons for staying quiet. The helicopter engine screamed. It was an old model, painted plain gray with no markings, the kind used for jobs nobody wanted to admit happened. The pilot pushed the throttle, trying to lift off the ground, but the wheels would not leave the dirt. Then it happened. A single loud crack split the air, louder than the rest. The front window of the cockpit shattered into a spider web of cracks. Red splashed across the glass from the inside. "Pilots hit," a young SEAL named Marcus shouted, dropping his rifle and crawling toward the cockpit. He came back seconds later, his face pale under the dirt and sweat. He looked at his team leader and shook his head slowly. No words were needed. Everyone understood. The team leader, a broad man named Sergeant Cole, grabbed the radio hanging from the ceiling. He pressed the button and shouted into it, but nothing came out except static. The wire had been cut by a stray bullet somewhere near the tail. Outside, the gunfire grew heavier. Rounds tore through the thin metal skin of the helicopter, punching small holes that let in beams of morning light. Dust floated through those beams like slow-falling snow. The rotor blades kept spinning above them, but the aircraft sat still on the ground, useless, like a duck with a broken wing. Every second they stayed still, more bullets found their target. Cole looked around the cabin at his team. 5 trained shooters. 5 men who could clear a building in seconds, who could jump from planes at night, who could survive weeks alone in a jungle with nothing but a knife. But not one of them knew how to fly a helicopter. That was never part of the job. He looked toward the cockpit one more time, hoping for a miracle that would not come. Then he turned back to the cabin and shouted the only thing left to shout. "Can anyone fly this?" His voice cracked from the strain of yelling over the gunfire. It was not really a question. It was closer to a prayer, thrown out into a cabin full of soldiers who had no answer to give. For a moment, nobody moved. The gunfire outside seemed to fade into the background, like the whole world had gone quiet just to hear if anyone would answer. Claire, still curled against the wall, opened her eyes wider. Her heart, already racing, seemed to skip and then pound even harder. She looked down at her own hands. They were shaking, covered in dirt, the nails broken and dark with old blood. She thought about staying where she was. Nobody expected anything from her. She was just the prisoner they rescued, the small woman in the corner who was supposed to sit still and let the professionals handle everything. If she stayed quiet, if she did nothing, whatever happened next would not be her fault. But if she did nothing, they would all die on this runway within the next 2 minutes. She knew that as clearly as she knew her own name. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she pushed her hands against the shaking floor and stood up. The cabin went silent. Every SEAL turned to look at her. Cole's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed like he could not believe what he was seeing. Marcus, halfway through wrapping a bandage around his own arm, stopped moving completely, the cloth strip hanging loose from his fingers. They stared at her the way people stare at something that should not be possible. A small, injured woman in a torn jumpsuit, standing calmly in the middle of a battle, looking toward the cockpit like she had somewhere important to be. "Sit down," Cole said, his voice flat and firm. He reached out a hand to guide her back to the floor. "You're in shock. Sit down before you get hurt." Claire looked at his hand, then at his face. "Move," she said. Her voice was rough, like gravel scraping against stone, but there was no shake in it at all. Cole blinked, surprised by the steadiness in her tone. Before he could argue further, Claire stepped past him, moving toward the cockpit with a speed that did not match her tired, injured body. The smell hit her first. Copper and something sharper, mixed with hot engine oil. She pushed the thought away and kept moving. The pilot was slumped forward against the controls, no longer breathing. Claire did not let herself look too closely. She had trained herself years ago to shut off that part of her mind in moments like this. A body in a chair was not a person right now. It was an obstacle. "Pull him out," she said over her shoulder, her voice steady and clear. Marcus appeared beside her without asking a single question this time. He grabbed the pilot by the shoulder straps and pulled him back into the cabin. Claire slid into the now empty seat. The cushion was warm and wet beneath her, but she did not let herself think about that either. Her eyes moved quickly across the instrument panel. Rows of dials, some cracked, some blinking with warning lights. Most of the writing was in a foreign language, but the layout was familiar enough. A control stick between her knees. A lever by her left hand. 2 pedals under her feet. "Are you serious?" Cole shouted, leaning into the cockpit doorway, his large frame blocking most of the light. "You're a hostage. You don't know how to fly a military helicopter." "I never said I was just a hostage," Claire replied, not looking away from the controls. "Hold on to something." Cole studied her face for 1 more second. Whatever he saw there made him turn back to the cabin and shout at his men to strap in and brace for impact. Claire wrapped her right hand around the control stick, still slick with blood. She wiped her palm quickly against her jumpsuit to get a better grip. Her left hand found the lever that controlled lift. Her feet found the pedals. She twisted the throttle grip, pushing more fuel into the engines. The whole aircraft groaned like an old machine waking up after a long sleep. Warning lights flashed faster. A steady beeping alarm filled the cockpit. "Come on," Claire whispered under her breath. "Come on, get up." She pulled back on the lever. The helicopter shook harder, but slowly, painfully, the wheels lifted from the dirt. The nose tilted up. Wind rushed through the cracked window, cold and sharp against her face. They were flying. It was rough and unsteady, but they were flying. Behind her, Cole leaned close, shouting over the noise of the wind and engines. "Who are you?" Claire kept her eyes forward, watching bright tracer round streak past the front window like angry orange fireflies. "Right now," she said, "I'm just the person flying this helicopter. Ask me later if we're still alive." Being in the air did not mean they were safe. It only meant the danger had changed shape. The instrument panel kept flashing warnings. A gauge showed the fuel dropping faster than it should, which meant a tank had been hit somewhere during takeoff. The controls felt heavy and stiff under her hands, harder to move than they should have been. Something in the hydraulic system had been damaged too. "Where are we going?" Cole asked, bracing himself against the cockpit doorway. "Away from the people shooting at us," Claire said. She did not have a map. The navigation screen was cracked and dark, showing nothing but broken pixels. She was flying by memory, using the little bit of the region's geography she had studied weeks ago, before she was captured. "We need a real direction," Cole pressed. "There's a checkpoint 40 miles east. Can this thing make it that far?" Claire glanced at the fuel gauge again, doing quick math in her head. "Not even close," she said. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the engines run dry. I need to find flat ground, and soon." "We're over mountains," Marcus called from the back, bracing his rifle against the open door frame. "It's all rock and cliffs down there." "Then I'll find the flattest rock I can," Claire snapped back, her hands tightening on the controls. A sharp metallic sound rang through the cabin, followed by a hiss. "Rocket, low and behind us!" Marcus screamed. Claire did not look back. Her hands moved on instinct, pushing the lever down hard. The helicopter dropped suddenly, like stepping off the edge of a stair in the dark. Everyone in the back was thrown upward against their harnesses. A streak of white smoke shot past the cracked window, missing the top of the aircraft by only a few feet. It exploded against a cliff wall ahead of them, sending chunks of rock flying into the valley below. Claire pulled the lever back up hard, fighting to stop their fall before they hit the ground. The engines screamed under the pressure. Metal groaned all around her. They leveled out just above a dry riverbed, close enough that she could see individual stones below. "Is everyone still breathing?" she called out, chest heaving. "Barely," Cole answered, picking himself up from where he had fallen. He looked at her with an expression that had changed completely from before. The doubt in his eyes was gone. In its place was something closer to respect. Before anyone could speak further, the right engine let out a loud bang. Black smoke poured from it, filling the cabin with a thick, choking smell. A grinding sound came from somewhere inside the machine, metal against metal, and then that engine died completely. "We've lost an engine," Claire said, her voice suddenly calm and flat. The panic that had been building inside her chest quietly disappeared, replaced by cold focus. "We're going down. Everyone brace." With only one working engine left, the heavy helicopter could not stay in the air. It began to sink, slow and heavy, toward the rocky riverbed below. Claire's mind ran through everything she knew about landing without power. It was called auto-rotation. As the helicopter falls, the air pushing up through the spinning blades can keep them turning, storing enough energy for one last controlled landing. It required perfect timing. Too early, and they would run out of lift before touching down. Too late, and they would hit the ground like a stone. The ground rushed closer. She watched the distance carefully, counting silently in her head. At 50 feet, she could see cracks in the rocks. At 30 feet, individual stones became clear and sharp. "Now," she said quietly, and pulled the lever up hard. The helicopter's nose lifted sharply, using the stored energy in the blades to slow their fall. It worked, but not perfectly. They were still moving too fast, and drifting slightly to the side. The tail section struck a large rock first. A loud crack echoed through the canyon as part of the tail broke away completely. Without it, the helicopter began spinning to one side. Claire was thrown against the side window, pain flashing white behind her eyes. The main body of the aircraft slammed into the riverbed. Metal crushed and bent under the impact. Claire's whole body jolted forward against the harness. She bit down hard, tasting blood in her mouth. The helicopter slid across the rocky ground for several long seconds, throwing up dust and sparks, before finally coming to a stop. Then, silence. It was not complete silence. The metal frame clicked and popped as it cooled. Somewhere, a fluid dripped steadily onto hot metal. But after the roar of gunfire and screaming engines, it felt like total quiet. Claire sat still for a moment, her hands locked tightly around the controls. Her whole body shook from the aftershock of the crash. Slowly, she forced her fingers to open, one at a time, and let go of the stick. Behind her, Cole unclipped himself and stood, checking on his men. Marcus was on the floor, holding his injured arm, but moving and breathing. Everyone had survived. Cole walked slowly to the cockpit doorway and looked down at Claire. Dust covered her face, mixing with dried blood on her chin. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Cole reached into his vest and pulled out a small water canteen. He unscrewed the cap and held it out to her. "You drink first," he said, his voice quiet now, all the earlier sharpness gone from it. Claire took the canteen with a shaking hand and drank slowly. The water was warm and tasted faintly of plastic, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted in her life. "Thank you," she said, handing it back. Cole took a sip himself, then looked out through the broken window at the empty, rocky valley around them. They were far from any safe zone, sitting in a wrecked helicopter in hostile land. But for the moment, they were alive. "So," Cole said, looking back at her, "where did you learn to fly like that?" Claire managed a small, tired smile despite the pain in her split lip. "I used to fly fighter jets," she said. "Helicopters were never my favorite." Cole slowly nodded, something like understanding settling into his tired eyes. "Good to know," he said. "Now let's get moving before something worse finds us out here." Claire pushed herself up from the seat, ignoring the pain in her legs and ribs. Whatever came next, she knew one thing clearly. She was not just the package anymore. She was part of the team that had to get everyone home. Outside the wreck, the air was dry and still. Dust from the crash hung low over the riverbed, slowly settling on the broken rocks. Cole moved quickly, pulling gear bags from the cabin and checking each man for injuries. Marcus limped but could walk. A third soldier named Reyes had a deep cut on his forehead, but his eyes were clear and his hands were steady. Claire stepped down from the ruined cockpit and looked around the canyon. Tall rock walls rose on both sides, orange and gray in the morning light. There was no road, no building, no sign of another human being for miles. It felt like standing on the surface of another planet. "We can't stay near the wreck," Cole said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Smoke like that will bring more than just curious goats. We move on foot until we find cover, then we figure out a new plan to reach the rally point." Claire nodded. Her legs were shaking from exhaustion, and every part of her body ached from the crash, but she forced herself to stand straight. "How far is the rally point without the helicopter?" she asked. "Too far to make in one day," Cole admitted. "But standing here is worse than walking." He looked at her for a long moment, the same way he had looked at her back in the cockpit, like he was still trying to understand who she really was. Then he simply handed her a spare rifle from Marcus's bag. "Can you use one of these too?" he asked. Claire took it, checked it quickly, and slung it across her shoulder like she had done it 1,000 times before. "Try me," she said. Cole allowed himself a small, tired smile, the first one since the fighting had started. He turned and gave the signal to move out. One by one, the group began walking down the dry riverbed, deeper into the mountains, away from the smoking wreck behind them. They walked for almost 3 hours. The sun climbed higher, turning the rocks hot under their boots. Nobody spoke much. Every few minutes, Cole raised a fist to stop the group while he checked the ridge line above them for movement. Each time, there was nothing but wind and dust. Near midday, they reached a narrow gap between two cliffs. Cole pulled a small backup radio from his vest, one that had survived the crash because it had been clipped to his body instead of hanging in the cabin. He turned the dial slowly, trying different channels, until a burst of static broke through, followed by a faint voice. "This is Ghost 6, does anyone copy?" Cole said, keeping his voice low. There was a pause, then a clearer voice answered. "Ghost 6, this is Overwatch. We read you. We lost contact after your bird went down. Say your status." 5 friendly, 1 civilian, all alive, Cole said. "Aircraft destroyed. We are on foot, moving north through a dry riverbed." Copy that, Ghost 6. Hold your position. We have a recovery team in the air, 10 minutes out. Cole lowered the radio and looked at his team. For the first time since the attack began, real relief showed on his face. 10 minutes, he said. We just have to hold here. They found cover behind a large rock formation and waited. Marcus kept watch on one side, Reyes on the other, while Claire sat with her back against the stone, finally allowing her body to rest. Cole sat down beside her. You never told me your name, he said. Claire, she answered quietly. Well, Claire, Cole said, you saved every person on that helicopter today, including me. Claire looked down at her cracked, blood-stained hands. I just did what I had to do, she said. That's usually how it works, Cole replied. A few minutes later, the low thump of rotor blades echoed through the canyon. A second helicopter appeared over the ridge, painted in matching plain gray, circling once before landing on a flat stretch of rock nearby. Soldiers jumped out, weapons ready, scanning the area before waving the group forward. Claire climbed aboard last, taking a seat near the open door. As the helicopter lifted off, she looked down at the wreck of the old transport, small and broken in the riverbed below, smoke still rising faintly into the sky. She had gone into that canyon as a prisoner with no name that mattered to anyone. She was leaving it as the pilot who brought a dying aircraft down safely and kept 5 strangers alive. Whatever waited for her back home, she knew that much would never be forgotten by the men sitting beside her now. The helicopter turned east, flying steady and smooth this time, carrying all 6 of them safely toward home.